Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. I am Patrick. This is Storytelling Imperfectly, and welcome to the channel. And if you are new to the channel, I am glad you found me, and I hope you like what you see. Guys, I've been gone for a while. I'm working full-time. I'm going to school full-time in the evenings, and I am busy. But I am back, and I got a crazy missing persons case for you today. And we're going to delve in and see if we can't figure out what happened to Charles Duane Gustafson. So sit back, relax, it's story time. Let's get into it. Charles Gustafson was a 72-year-old guy who loved to hunt. He had been married to his wife Patricia for 50 years. He was stable. He had 4 daughters that he had raised to adulthood successfully, which is better than some of us are doing this day and age. And all in all, just an all-around solid guy. Now, at 72, you may think that's old, but in today's standards, guys, not so much. You know, he was a relatively fit man. In fact, Charles used to be in the Air Force and was a wilderness survival expert for the Air Force. So the man knew what he was doing when he went out into the wilds, which he did often because Charles's true passion was hunting. And one of the animals that Charles particularly liked to hunt was elk. Now, he was from Beltrami, Minnesota, and the elk population obviously is not that great there. So what Charles would do is that he would take trips year after year after year and go to Wyoming, where elk hunting is particularly good. So this particular time, in 2006, Charles, his cousin, and his nephew planned a trip to Wyoming. Now, the place that they went was in Medicine Bow National Forest, or just outside of it, a place near Stud Creek, which was actually not too far away from the Colorado border and about 20 miles from Laramie, Wyoming. Charles and his cousin and his nephew were well versed, as I said, with the outdoors, but they were also well provisioned. They were dressed for inclement weather, and Charles, being a survival expert in the Air Force, knew exactly what to do when he was out in the wild. Now, Charles being 72 may be of concern to some of you guys when you hear this story, because a lot of us think of 72-year-old guys as elderly. However, in this day and age, and remember this happened back in 2006, it's not so much the case. I mean, I ran into a guy the other day that was 70 years old. I would have swore that the guy was in his late 50s, early 60s. People today are much fitter today than they were, 40, 50 years ago. And Charles was an example of this. He was mentally sound, he was mentally sharp, and he was physically fit. When they got to their campground and established camp, they stayed the night. This was on October the 10th of 2006. Later that day, apparently Charles and his nephew and his cousin decided after eating breakfast that they were going to go hunting and get their hunting trip underway. They made plans, and ultimately they decided to separate and go hunting individually on their own. Now, this is always a point of contention for me. It kind of bothers me when it comes to these cases, because when there's this point of separation, when people decide to go off on their own in national forest and in the wilds, bad things tend to happen, at least in these missing person cases that I cover, and this one is no different. However, this one is slightly off normal, because later that evening, as it started to get dark, Charles never returned to the campsite, and his nephew and his cousin grew concerned. But luckily for Charles, later that day, a logger who was working out into the wilds of Wyoming came across Charles and clearly saw that Charles was lost. So he decided to give Charles a lift back to his camp, which he did, and to the great relief of Charles's cousin and nephew. And they were quite shocked, though, because Charles was not the kind of guy to get lost in the woods. He just wasn't. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible for a wilderness expert to become lost in the woods, but I would say that it's highly unlikely. The man knew what he was doing, and for him to become disoriented the way he was is very strange. However, he had made it back to camp successfully, and the guys had dinner, and they joked about it a little bit, and they went to bed. The next morning on October the 11th, they woke again, they had breakfast, and then they discussed their plans for the day's hunting. And yet again, Charles said that he would like to go off on his own. And the cousin and the nephew agree. Charles was not acting strange. He wasn't acting confused or weird or disoriented. He seemed normal, So they said sure. Now, when Charles left camp this time, he was well provisioned. He had water, he had food, he had his rifle, which was a 30-06, which is a high-powered rifle. He had extra ammunition, he had a knife. More importantly, Charles had a GPS locator. He had a map and a compass, which he was well versed in using. And off he went into the woods. As the day progressed, things seemed to be going well for the other men. They enjoyed their hunting. They eventually, in the evening, came back to the campsite. But again, Charles didn't show. And as the evening wore on and they waited for Charles, they grew concerned. But nonetheless, as it grew dark, his relatives were very upset. And so they fired 3 rounds off. And all things being what they were, they actually got 3 rounds returned, which is a universal sign for hunters to locate themselves. If they're lost in the woods, they usually fire their weapon 3 rounds. The standard is to shoot it at the ground, guys, not up in the air. But they did get a return fire. So when they heard Charles fire off 3 rounds himself, considered it as a sign that Charles was oriented now and that Charles knew where camp was and that he would come back. But after waiting about an hour and it got dark, Charles didn't show back up. So they went to the local sheriff's department, which was in Carbon County. Now, Jerry Colson, who was the sheriff of Carbon County, immediately went into action once Charles was reported missing by his family members. And his family, and Charles's family was very optimistic. Not only was Charles dressed for inclement weather and well-versed in survival in the outdoors. I mean, it's what he did in the Air Force, guys. They just assumed that Charles was suffering some sort of short-term disorientation and that maybe, he had hurt himself and that he would be found, because Charles understood about sitting in place if you're lost in the woods, not to go wandering around. Charles was able to start fires. I mean, he had the capability to do so. He had food, he had water, and the weather wasn't that bad. I mean, at this point in time in October in Wyoming, the nights get chilly, but during the day it was still in the 60s and the 50s. And again, Charles was dressed for the weather, so they really weren't that concerned. Not only that, but Sheriff Colson threw everything he had at it. He brought in dog teams, canine units, he brought in ATVs, he brought in equestrian units, horses. He had numerous SAR guys on the ground searching for Charles. They knew his relative location, and so they were very optimistic that they would find Charles. After a couple of days of searching, though, there was no sign of Charles. And in fact, the canine units couldn't pick up Charles's scent, which I find super strange. There wasn't inclement weather, so there was no rain or anything that would have washed Charles's scent away. The dogs just couldn't pick it up. Then, Sheriff Colson decided to up the ante a little bit. And what he did was he went to Warren Air Force Base and he requested the use of a helicopter. And it was granted. So now the Air Force is in the search. And so not only do you have Sheriff's Department, you have civilians searching, you have canine units, you have guys on ATV and horseback, they're firing rounds off, they're calling out Charles's name. But now Warren Air Force Base sent a helicopter in that's flying at treetop level, and they searched 20 some odd square miles for this guy, for Charles. No sign of Charles. This is baffling to me. I cover these missing hunter cases, which really I find perplexing, because they're outdoorsmen. I mean, usually these guys are well versed in being out in the woods and surviving out in the woods. And they're armed, So what happened to Charles? Because to this day, Charles has never been found. His body has never been found. No sign of Charles has been found. His weapon has never been found. I mean, bones and people decay, sure. Animal predation being what it is, if Charles died of injury or natural causes because of his age or something like that, or hypothermia, his body would decay. But his firearm wouldn't. So it's super strange to me. I also find it very odd that no sign of Charles has ever been found. I mean, nothing. Nothing at all. It's one thing for you not to find a body but for guys to be searching and know the area in which Charles was supposed to be. I mean, even if he wandered off, they knew where he started. And so heading into the woods and then searching a massive area of land for this guy and finding not a single shred of evidence is ultimately super creepy as far as I'm concerned. I think something got Charles. I don't know what. I'm not going to speculate as to such. I'll let you guys make up your own mind on that. Unfortunately, though, Charles was never found. In 2007, his wife had Charles legally declared dead by a court of law so that she could get her benefits. And that's super sad. You know, I mean, in 2007, a year after Charles' disappearance, the courts did declare Charles dead. So Charles is not listed missing on a national registry. He is listed as deceased. But ultimately, again, a very sad thing for the family. My heart goes out to them. But that's it. That's all I got, guys. I know this is kind of a short video. Again, I am super busy. But for all you guys that are supporting the channel, that are subscribing, keep coming back, and have stuck with me through my absence, it is so appreciated. It means the world to me. And I'm going to try to upload at least once a month again, guys. I'm trying to get back into it. But again, my schedule being what it is, I am burning the candle at both ends. So bear with me, but more videos are coming. Patrick is not gone, and please, if you are new to the channel, consider subscribing. Keep coming back and hanging out with me. If you enjoyed this video, hit the old thumbs up button, turn it blue. And all in all, guys, hit the bell, get the notification so you don't miss out on the next video that I do upload. But that's it for Patrick today. I am out of here, and I will see you guys in the next video.